Hey guys, tonight we're trekking deep into the heart of the Amazon rainforest, where the air is thick with heat, the trees hum with insect lullabies, and something is, just barely, moving. Picture this. You're wandering through a forest so dense it feels like you're underwater. Shafts of green filtered sunlight struggle to reach the muddy floor, and every few steps, a vine grabs your ankle like it's trying to tell you a secret. But then, just as you catch your balance, you see it. A tree. With legs. Not legs in the way you'd expect. No knees, no toes, but long, thin roots that stretch outward like stilts, lifting the trunk slightly above the ground. And here's the kicker. This tree, you're told, moves. Not in a dramatic, haunted forest kind of way, but slowly, deliberately, over time. Maybe a few centimeters a year, maybe more. The locals say it walks. Scientists argue over what that even means. And well, you're suddenly rethinking your decision to eat that mysterious Amazonian fruit from earlier. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments so we can see where in the world we're drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing ankle deep in muck, listening to howler monkeys scream at nothing in particular, and watching this root-limbed giant as if it might blink. The jungle doesn't do straight lines. Everything winds and coils, breaks and grows again. Even trees are part of this twitchy, breathing mosaic. And while most of the Amazon's trees look sturdy and immovable, one species messes with your sense of what's real. It's like nature's prank, right there in front of you. Something that's supposed to stay put doesn't. And suddenly, it all feels alive in a new way. This is the realm of Socratia exoryza, better known, at least to curious backpackers and amateur botanists, as the walking palm. This tree has become the poster child of rainforest weirdness. The legs? They're actually stilt roots, radiating out from the trunk like the spokes of a wooden umbrella. They anchor the palm in the spongy earth and supposedly allow it to inch across the forest floor over time. Now, the idea of a walking tree isn't just clickbait for eco-nerds. It's a deeply poetic, if slightly spooky concept. Trees are supposed to symbolize stillness, roots, foundations. But this palm, it's got places to be. Local guides will tell you that when the palm senses darkness, say, if another tree shades it, it grows new roots in a sunnier direction and slowly shifts its trunk to follow the light. Old roots rot away, and the whole organism creeps along like a green, silent stork. Depending on whom you ask, it can walk up to 2 or 3 centimeters a day. Over a year, that's a couple of meters. Not exactly Olympic speed, but hey, when you've got centuries, who's rushing? Now, let's pull back for a second. The Amazon basin spans over 6 million square kilometers. That's roughly the size of the contiguous United States. And in this cathedral of biodiversity, where jaguars stalk tapirs and fungus whispers to tree roots, mobility is a major advantage, even for things without feet. Trees here don't just grow. They hustle, dodge, adapt, or die. And death in the rainforest isn't theatrical. It's quiet. A soft thump muffled by leaves, then 1,000 organisms show up to feast. So if you can shift even slightly toward better sunlight, away from rot, or just out of the reach of a rival's choking vines. Why wouldn't you? Some scientists, though, raise a skeptical eyebrow at this whole walking narrative. They argue that what looks like movement might just be a form of root restructuring, not actual relocation. But we'll come back to that later, because there's a lot more mud to slog through before we settle that debate. For now, picture it again. The tree with its splaying roots, like a dancer halfway through a frozen twirl, tilting toward the light, and you can almost hear the creak of slow muscle, except it's wood, growing in loops and curls instead of steps. You reach out, touch the bark, and it's warm from the sun. There's moss growing in its shadow, and beetles tunneling into its base. Life on top of life, layered like a millefeuille. If that pastry were made of fungus, bugs, and leafy despair. And just as you're about to pull your hand away, you notice something stranger, a faint depression in the mud, almost like a footprint, but not human, and definitely not stationary. Did it move? You whisper, as if you might wake it up. Spoiler, you won't. Not tonight. But now you're tuned into the jungle's strange language, the squeaks of tree frogs, the buzz of a mosquito with dreams of blood, the groan of bamboo flexing in the wind, and beneath all of it, the possibility that somewhere, somehow, a tree is quietly taking a step. In a world where everything from snakes to clouds to politics is unpredictable, maybe there's comfort in the idea that even trees have figured out how to go with the flow. Let's take another step, if you will, into the jungle. The thing about the Amazon is that nothing is still for long. Not the weather, not the animals, not even the ground. You might think of a forest floor as something stable, something you can count on. But down here, it shifts under your boots like a living thing. A place where decay is as relentless as growth, where roots twist through soil that's only pretending to be solid. The floor beneath the walking palm isn't just dirt, it's a biological blender, a hot, moist, ever-churning soup of leaf litter, fungal networks, insects, old roots, and fresh ambitions. The rain comes in sheets, not drops. 1 minute it's sunny, the next it's flash flooded, and everything is half submerged. What used to be a slope becomes a ditch. What used to be dry land becomes soup. And when the land itself rearranges the furniture every few days, it's no wonder that the plants start getting twitchy. Here's your mainstream geography fact. The Amazon basin floods cyclically every year. Rivers rise by up to 10 meters in some places during the rainy season, submerging vast tracts of forest for months at a time. Trees that want to live here have to be amphibious in spirit, if not in biology. They need roots that won't drown, and trunks that don't mind being temporarily turned into a fish hotel. Now imagine trying to be a seedling in that chaos. You're born into mud. You're expected to grow toward the sun. But the sun keeps disappearing behind bigger trees. Then the ground floods, and half your roots rot. If you're lucky, you adapt. If you're very lucky, you're a walking palm. The forest floor is a dynamic battlefield. Trees fall often. Lightning, termites, old age, or just a bit too much rain on the wrong slope. When a giant crashes down, it clears a sunlit hole in the canopy, and suddenly, it's a land rush. Every nearby plant throws itself toward that fresh beam of light, like it's free Wi-Fi in an airport. It's a burst of speed in a race that usually moves in millimeters. And the roots? Oh, they know the game. You'll find species whose roots climb up other trees instead of digging into the ground. roots that strangle rivals, roots that trap water like sponges, roots that pulse with life even when the leaves are gone. It's all one big below-ground Cold War. Now comes the quirky tidbit. Some scientists believe the forest floor itself breathes, not in a poetic sense, but literally. As temperatures change throughout the day, and as gases like CO2 and methane shift under the soil, the ground expands and contracts by tiny degrees, almost like it's exhaling. So yes, it's possible that even the dirt beneath you is moving, however slightly, and everything that's rooted to it is forced to adjust. In that context, a walking tree isn't all that ridiculous. If the ground keeps changing shape beneath you, if the light keeps shifting like a spotlight in a paranoid play, then anchoring in one spot might not be the best strategy. You want options. You want legs, or something close enough. Scientists still argue about whether these soil shifts are enough to explain the walking palm's unique stilt roots. Some suggest it's less about mobility and more about drainage. The higher the roots, the less chance of rotting in floodwater. Others think the structure is a defense against toppling in muddy terrain. After all, a tripod is harder to knock over than a pole. But every now and then, a root grows a little longer in one direction, then another, and another. And before you know it, the tree has tilted just a bit. Not fallen, just leaned, just nudged. One root dies, another takes its place. Tiny adjustments over months and years. We humans call it walking. The forest doesn't care what we call it. Picture it again. A floor made of crumbling bark and buried beetles. 1,000 ants hauling leaf fragments like green sails. Mushrooms bursting like popcorn from damp logs. Somewhere nearby, a jaguar pads silently past, leaving no trace. And here, amid it all, a tree that has learned how to stay. By not staying. Every step in the jungle is a negotiation. Between water and root. Between light and leaf. Between you and the unknown thing that just slithered behind that fern. The walking palm might not cover miles, but in a place this restless, even a few inches can mean the difference between thriving and dying. You lean down, squint at the base of the tree again. Some roots are old, gray and brittle. Others are fresh, reddish, firm, pushing into the ground like spears. It's like watching a time lapse in slow motion. Birth, decay, progress. It's movement, just wearing the costume of stillness. You don't need a stopwatch to know it's alive. And then, of course, there's you, squinting at a palm tree in the mud, half wondering if it's watching you. Don't worry, the trees have their own problems. You're still deep in the rainforest now, wiping sweat off your face with a leaf that might not actually be a leaf. Careful. And there it is again, that tree. Slender, straight, crowned with feather-like fronds that whisper in the breeze like they know secrets. And all around its trunk, a thicket of roots, shooting down at a slant like a geometric spider's legs. You've officially met Socratea exorrhiza, the so-called walking palm. Botanists will tell you it's a member of the Araceae family, which includes everything from date palms to coconut trees. But unlike its sandy beach cousins, this one doesn't bother with reclining lazily in the sun. No, Socratea prefers the chaos of the understory, where light is a luxury and stability is, well, highly overrated. From the base of its trunk, thick roots, technically known as stilt roots, jut out like stilts under a carnival performer. They're often tinged a rusty brown or dark gray and can reach nearly 2 meters high, depending on the tree's age and the terrain's mood. These roots don't just plunge into the earth vertically. They arch outward first, forming a kind of root pyramid that keeps the palm aloft like a high wire act over the swamp. It's absurdly elegant and a little alien. Think of a tripod from a sci-fi movie, frozen mid-step. If that tripod also produced coconuts the size of mangoes and occasionally housed colonies of stinging ants. A real charmer. Now here's the mainstream geography fact. Socratia exoryza isn't just found in the Amazon. It also grows in parts of Central America and the western slopes of the Andes, from Nicaragua all the way down to Bolivia. Always in humid lowland forests. Always in places where the ground can turn against you with a single rainstorm. But nowhere does it become as iconic, nay, mythical, as in the Amazon itself. And that's where the legend of the walking tree starts to take root. The tale goes like this. When the tree loses balance, say its soil erodes or it's suddenly leaning toward darkness, it responds by growing new stilt roots in a more favorable direction. The old ones, they die off. Over time, the trunk slowly follows the lead of the new roots. The whole tree therefore moves. Not fast, not far, but undeniably. It's not just a popular myth among eco-tourists and camera-wielding backpackers. Local guides across Peru and Ecuador will point at the palm and swear it used to be over there. And you'll look at them like, sure, maybe you drank too much chicha beer last night, but now you're seeing it. Still, let's be a bit cynical for balance. It's possible, likely even, that the tree didn't walk so much as grow lopsided, then compensated for that by adjusting its balance with new roots. That's not a hike. That's physical therapy. Scientists still argue about whether the tree truly relocates. Some say the growth of new roots and death of old ones is just a reaction to changing ground conditions, not a conscious search for new territory. Others argue that over long periods, it can result in lateral movement, however slow. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some early botanists, dazzled by the sight of the stilt roots and trusting local tales, claimed the palm could walk up to 20 meters a year. That would make it faster than a tortoise and roughly the same speed as a sloth having a productive afternoon. Needless to say, this claim did not hold up under scientific scrutiny. Later, observations rolled those numbers back dramatically, more like 2-3 centimeters a day at best. Still impressive for something without a nervous system. Standing under the palm, you get why the story stuck. There's something suggestive about its design, the way it leans ever so slightly, the way the roots splay like limbs in mid-stride. It looks like it should be walking. And in a forest where poison frogs wear neon like runway models and fungi control zombie insects, the idea doesn't feel out of place. You crouch down, peer between the roots. The space beneath the trunk is often hollow, like a tiny shaded alcove where nothing should live but definitely does. Tiny frogs, ants with schedules, spiders pretending to be sticks. It's a drama in every cubic inch. And then there's the sound, not of the tree itself, of course, but the way it warps the jungle acoustics. Rain trickling off its broad fronds, wind threading between its stilts like the notes of a flute. Every sound here has depth, layers, echoes. Even silence is busy. And just as you're considering all this, you spot a younger version nearby, a sapling with roots only beginning to arch out, like it's stretching before a jog. You imagine it moving through the years, inching toward light, dodging rot, outlasting the crowd. What does it mean, after all, to be a walking tree in a place like this? Survival is the first answer. Drama is the second. But maybe, just maybe, it walks because it can. Let's get down to the mechanics. How does a tree walk anyway? Spoiler, it doesn't lace up a pair of boots and strut through the rainforest doing jazz hands. But Socratia exoryza has its own weird choreography, and it's all about those stilt roots. It's not walking in the way we do. It's more like root-led migration, one deliberate pivot at a time. You're standing beside one of these palms now, watching as the roots rise out of the earth like they're trying to escape it. Some curve gracefully, like dancers mid-pose. Others are cracked and crumbling, abandoned by the tree like yesterday's shoes. This is the root ballet, slow, silent, and strangely elegant. Here's the process. As far as we understand it, the palm senses environmental stress. A shadow falls across it, the soil beneath starts eroding, or moisture levels change. In response, it begins growing new roots on the side that offers better conditions. Brighter light, firmer ground, maybe even more nutrients from decaying leaf matter. These roots stretch downward at an angle, slowly reaching for new territory like fingers probing into unfamiliar fabric. As the new roots establish themselves, the older ones, usually on the opposite side, start to rot away. They dry out, shrink, and eventually collapse. Over time, this push and pull results in a subtle shift of the trunk itself. It's a move. Not a fast one, and not always a long one, but a move nonetheless. Think of it like a three-legged stool, with one leg slowly scooting forward while the others fade out behind it. It's more shuffle than strut, more tiptoe than stride, but the result? A gentle, creeping migration across the forest floor. Here's your mainstream fact. Stilt roots aren't unique to this species. Other tropical trees, like the red mangrove, also grow above-ground roots to stabilize themselves in muddy, unstable environments. It's a common strategy in places where regular roots would rot or drown, but Socratia takes this to an extreme, turning root growth into a possible form of locomotion. Now here's your quirky tidbit. One fringe theory suggests that walking palms may not just move toward better light or ground, but away from something, like pathogens, or parasites, or particularly aggressive neighbors. In other words, it's not always about going towards something lovely. It's sometimes about fleeing something horrible, which, let's be honest, is deeply relatable. Scientists still argue about what triggers this root behavior most consistently. Is it phototropism, the tree seeking out light? Is it a reaction to soil compaction? Is it just a form of load distribution, like a tent repositioning its stakes during a storm? Or is it a combination of subtle cues we don't fully understand yet? Some studies even suggest that the tree doesn't actually move at all, that the center of mass remains in the same spot, and only the root architecture changes around it. The illusion of movement, they argue, is compelling but misleading. You can almost hear the academic sighs as they publish another paper debating millimeters. But for now, let's stick with what we can see. You lean closer. The air is thick with that damp wood smell, the perfume of decay and renewal. You spot a cluster of ants navigating one of the roots, stopping every few inches as if confused by the traffic pattern. Lichens paint patches of the root surface in pale green scribbles. A single beetle, metallic and red, scrambles over the curve of a root like it's climbing a bridge. This whole undertree area feels like a world unto itself. If you were tiny, ant-sized, it would be a city, an architectural wonder built on slow decisions. And then you notice something new, a slight lean in the trunk, barely noticeable, but it's there, tilted ever so gently in the direction of a sunbeam slicing through the canopy. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe you're watching the tree mid-pirouette, center of mass shifting, balance resetting, roots negotiating a new pose. This is not movement as we know it. It's not instant. It doesn't demand attention, but it's patient, quiet, effective. One root forward, two roots rot, shift the weight, repeat. And all the while, above your head, the fronds stay calm. Not a single leaflet flutters out of sync. The tree gives no hint that it's engaged in a slow-motion dance. It doesn't boast. It doesn't rush. But one day, years from now, it might no longer be here. It might be 3 feet to the left, quietly winning its long, leafy chess game. You sit on a nearby rock, which turns out not to be a rock, but a camouflaged toad. Sorry. And take one last glance at the palm. Is it walking? Technically. Maybe. Philosophically. Absolutely. Movement doesn't always need urgency. Sometimes it's enough to intend to move and act on that intention a single root at a time. So, by now you've watched this palm subtly sidle its way through the jungle like an introvert at a crowded party, deliberately avoiding drama, but still moving. But what's chasing it exactly? Or maybe a better question, what makes movement necessary in the first place? The Amazon isn't just lush, it's unstable. Not politically, although, well, no, we're talking about the literal ground under your feet. If you could fast forward a camera through 100 rainy seasons, the rainforested floor would look like a chaotic slow-motion avalanche. Mudslides, seasonal flooding, collapsed trees, landslides, and the occasional burst of fungal warfare. It's the world's most beautiful mess. And in that mess, if you're a tree, you adapt or you fall. Here's your mainstream geography fact. The Amazon is built on ancient nutrient-poor soil. Most of its nutrients are locked above ground in the dense biomass of plants and animals. So when something falls, say a 100-year-old canopy tree, it's stripped clean by fungus, insects, and sunlight within weeks. And suddenly, the forest floor becomes a battlefield of opportunity. Walking palms, like other jungle specialists, survive by being flexible, and not just metaphorically. Their root systems allow them to stabilize on uneven slopes, grow into tilted ground, and reposition after mild erosion events. Imagine a skyscraper growing legs every time the foundation shifted a few inches. That's the vibe. But it's not just landslides that threaten them. Even a little bit of extra shade can spell doom. With competition this fierce, a shadow is a slow death sentence. If another tree leans too far, or a liana vine gets too comfy, or a thick mat of leaves blocks precious sunbeams, a palm has to react. And in the rainforest, reaction time is measured in months. That's where the walking comes in. It's not about going anywhere exciting. It's about avoiding trouble. Like stepping slightly to the side when someone spills hot soup next to your chair. Except in this case, the soup is a slow rise in water table acidity. Now, for your quirky tidbit, in some areas of the Amazon, entire groves of walking palms lean in the same direction, as if they're part of a slow-motion stampede. Scientists have found clusters of trees whose stilt roots point eastward, all of them tilted like they're running from something in the west. One theory: gradual soil erosion following seasonal floods. Another: a microclimate effect drawing all the growth toward a consistent sun angle. But local folklore offers a simpler answer. They are escaping the spirits of the forest, as if the trees themselves know when to leave a haunted neighborhood. Scientists still argue whether these synchronized leans are meaningful or random. Is it coordinated migration, coincidence, subterranean communication? Or are we just humans projecting agency onto something that really isn't worried about us? What is clear, though, is that the forest floor is not a place for complacency. One week, you're basking in a sunbeam. The next, a 60-meter tree has collapsed 3 feet away and buried your roots under a metric ton of bark and debris. That's not just inconvenient, it's catastrophic. So any root system that can recover, reroot, or relocate, that's a superpower. Think about that next time you see a houseplant drooping because it missed one watering. You reach down and touch the soil beside a walking palm. It's squishy, rich with decomposing matter, crawling with ants, and probably hosting 17 types of bacteria that haven't even been discovered yet. Life here doesn't build on the ground. It builds with it, constantly, in all directions. Down into it, over it, around it. And that's why trees with the ability to step away from disaster, even just slightly, have an edge. It's not about walking toward a goal. It's about minimizing risk, avoiding death by shade or rot, and surviving just long enough to drop your seeds into a better zip code. You might not see it, but danger is everywhere. A fungus that causes root rot. A colony of termites setting up shop. A jaguar rubbing against your trunk is like scaring off pollinators with its pheromones. Okay, that one's a stretch, but still. Sometimes the most important move is just out of the way. So the walking palm does what few trees can. It acts slowly, quietly, unapologetically. It doesn't ask permission from the moss or wait for a safety briefing. One root reaches forward, another dies, shift complete, and all without a sound. The next time you see it, it might be just a few inches off from where you left it. You might not even notice, but the forest will. Step carefully now. We're about to leave the realm of science for a moment and wander into the smoke-swirled territory of myth. Because the Amazon isn't just a jungle. It's a library of legends, whispered from tree to tree, passed down through generations of forest dwellers. And in these stories, the walking palm isn't merely a quirky botanical anomaly. It's alive in ways the textbooks won't explain. Imagine you're huddled around a fire in a riverside village. It's just past dusk. The forest hums like it always does, but tonight there's something underneath it. A silence too steady, too alert. An elder leans in, lowering their voice, and begins. There are trees that walk when no one's looking, and they remember where you've been. Welcome to the mythos. The walking palm, to many Amazonian tribes, is not just a tree, it's a spirit sentinel. Among the Shure and the Achuar peoples of Ecuador, and certain Matses communities along the Peru-Brazil border, stories tell of palms that move not just for sunlight, but to follow people. Not in a horror movie way, okay, maybe slightly, but more as guardians or observers. It's said that if you disrespect the forest, cut trees carelessly, leave garbage, speak arrogantly, the palms remember. And sometimes they move closer. Cue nervous laughter. But there's more to it. In some tales, the walking trees are protectors of sacred sites, burial grounds, spirit wells, or hidden places where humans are not meant to tread. If someone wanders too close, the trees shift subtly over time to block the path. One story involves a boy who wandered deep into the jungle and became lost. Days later, he stumbled upon a clearing he swore had never existed, ringed entirely by walking palms, as if they'd gathered to trap him. He survived, but never went back. Now for your quirky tidbit. There's a Brazilian myth that walking palms are reincarnated shamans. Their souls, too powerful for human form, return as trees that still possess agency. Not fast, not talkative, but watchful. Sentinels of old knowledge. If you sit beneath one and listen long enough, you might hear the forest murmuring things you're not supposed to understand. And let's be honest, standing beneath these things at twilight, when the roots cast jagged shadows and the air smells like wet stone, you kind of get it. There's a presence, something halfway between stillness and attention. Even their structure supports the mystique. The hollow beneath their stilt roots forms a natural chamber, big enough for a small person to crouch inside. Children, of course, play there, but adults, they step around. Some even leave small offerings, bits of fruit, feathers, coins, not because the tree needs them, but because it might be polite. Here's your mainstream geography fact. Trees feature prominently in animistic belief systems across the globe, especially in rainforests. From the baobabs of Madagascar to the oaks of Celtic Europe, certain trees are seen as vessels for spirits, ancestral or otherwise. The walking palm, with its bizarre form and supposed mobility, fits neatly into this worldwide pattern. Scientists still argue about the influence of myth on ecological behavior. That is, how traditional stories affect conservation. In some parts of the Amazon, villages avoid cutting walking palms not because of environmental law, but because of respect. The tree has become taboo, sacred by reputation, and that has helped preserve it far more effectively than zoning maps or biodiversity conferences. You look up at the palm again. You can almost imagine a pair of unseen eyes peering through the roots, blinking once. The leaves rustle in the windless air. A frog chirps. A beetle scurries away, like it just remembered something urgent. And for a moment, you wonder if that story, the one about the trees, moving to guard secrets, might have a ring of truth to it. Maybe it's not literal. Maybe it's a metaphor. But then again, maybe it's just something science hasn't caught up to yet. You take a step back, slowly, like a guest leaving a room they weren't invited into. You nod at the tree, just in case. It does not nod back. But in this forest, silence is a kind of conversation. You wipe a bit of sweat from your brow with your already sweaty sleeve and glance to your left. And there it is again. Another tree that seems off. Not a walking palm this time. Thicker, more twisted. Its roots are fused with the trunk of another tree, so tightly they look like they've always been one. Except they weren't. You've just found yourself in the tangled embrace of a strangler fig. Here's a strange truth about the Amazon. The walking palm might be the most famous moving tree, but it's far from alone in the category of arboreal wanderers. The jungle is full of plants that move, or at least behave like they're trying to relocate. Some creep, some smother, some hitch rides. It's like the plant kingdom took one look at the chaos of the rainforest and said, stillness is for amateurs. Let's start with the strangler fig, or ficus species. It doesn't walk, it conquers. The seed usually starts life in the crook of another tree, dropped there by a bird or monkey. From that high perch, it sends roots downward, inch by inch, until they touch the soil. Then it begins a long, slow strangulation, wrapping around the host tree, crushing it over time, and eventually replacing it completely. The fig wins. The host dies. And somehow, the whole process feels like a slow motion assassination conducted in total silence. Next up in the plant movement squad, lianas, those thick woody vines that swing Tarzan style from canopy to canopy. But don't let the adventure movie vibe fool you. These plants are strategic. They grow rapidly, attaching themselves to whatever vertical surface they can find. Their roots stay anchored in one spot, but their reach, nearly unlimited, like if Spider-Man had a botany degree. Lianas don't move in the traditional sense, but they can shift weight, redirect growth, and follow light and structure dynamically over time. Some can move several meters horizontally in their lifetime, not by walking, but by climbing. They don't conquer space, they surf it. And then there are the creepers, ferns, mosses, epiphytes, air plants that drift through time by clinging to higher, more successful neighbors. They don't touch the ground at all. They ride trees like parasitic elevators, staying close to the light without having to build a trunk of their own. Talk about efficiency. Here's your mainstream geography fact. Over 60% of the Amazon's plant biomass is made up of non-tree species: vines, shrubs, epiphytes, mosses, and creepers. That's a lot of plants that figured out how to thrive without ever planting both feet, or any feet, in one place. Now, for your quirky tidbit. Some lianas are actually directional. Once established, they'll send exploratory tips toward trees that offer the best climbing path and retract from dead ends. The jungle's version of a self-guided drone, except slower and leafier. And the rainforest isn't just a playground for plants that move. It's also full of animals that move the plants. Take the agouti, a rodent about the size of a plump house cat. These guys are responsible for burying Brazil nuts across the forest, which they later forget about. And boom, new trees grow. Some scientists call agoutis four-legged gardeners. Then there are the bats and birds that eat fruits and drop seeds kilometers away, wrapped neatly in organic fertilizer. Mobility outsourced. Why move when something else will move you? Scientists still argue about how much agency to assign to these behaviors. Is it movement? Is it just phototropism and gravity doing their thing? Or are plants more adaptive, more observant than we give them credit for? The field of plant neurobiology is emerging. Yes, that's a thing. And it's poking hard at the line between reaction and intention. And this brings us back to the walking palm, not as a lone weirdo, but as one part of a much bigger pattern. In the Amazon, being rooted doesn't mean being stuck. Trees creep, vines reach, roots redirect, seeds hitchhike. Movement is not a luxury here. It's a strategy. You glance up again and see a vine that wasn't there yesterday. Or maybe it was. You just didn't notice how far it had reached. You take a step forward, and your boot sinks a little deeper into the spongy soil. Around you, plants compete for sunlight, climb over each other, invade each other's trunks, and spread without permission. This place doesn't just grow, it shifts. Everything's trying to go somewhere. And even if it doesn't get there quickly, it gets there eventually. You pause for a moment beneath a tangled canopy where the sunlight filters down in hazy columns, turning the air golden. It's easy to forget that light is currency here, arguably the only one that matters. Every plant you've passed so far has been grasping toward it like it's offering a raise, the walking palm included. But can a tree chase light? It turns out, yes, sort of. We're about to dive into one of the stranger behaviors in the Amazon, light migration, or as some botanists lovingly refer to it, the art of not dying in the shade. This behavior isn't exclusive to the walking palm, but it's likely one of the reasons it evolved those funky, leaning stilts in the first place. Here's your mainstream geography fact. In rainforests like the Amazon, over 95% of incoming sunlight is absorbed or deflected by the upper canopy. That means the forest floor gets just a sliver, less than 5%, of usable sunlight. That's like trying to read a book by the glow of a matchstick. If you're a young sapling, you need to find that light, or your compost. And here's where things get really weird. Plants can sense light direction, not just light in general, directional light. Through a process called phototropism, they grow toward it. Cells on the shaded side of a stem elongate faster than those in the sun, causing the whole structure to bend in the light's direction. It's a basic response found in houseplants on windowsills and apparently ambitious jungle trees. Now, imagine you're a walking palm. You've got a few root spokes firmly in the mud, but over time, you're shaded by a larger neighbor. What do? You don't run. You lean, just slightly. And then you grow new roots in that sunnier direction. They thicken. They dig in. The old shaded roots, they shrink, rot, and disappear. A few years later, you've tilted into the light. You haven't walked exactly, but you got out from under that shadow, didn't you? And here's your quirky tidbit. Some biologists think walking palms might be able to shift their orientation by as much as 2 or 3 meters over their lifetime. Not exactly sprinting, but if you're being slowly smothered by vines and fungus, 3 meters can feel like 100. And now comes the mind bender. There's a theory, still debated, that trees may sense not just light, but also changes in the direction of sunlight through seasons, even subtle shifts caused by neighboring branches or clouds. In this theory, plants don't just grow toward light, they grow away from future darkness. Predictive growth, like fortune telling, but greener. Scientists still argue whether this crosses the line into plant intelligence. Is it memory? Anticipation? Some say it's just chemical response, no different than rust spreading. Others suggest it might be something more, an evolved pattern of environmental learning executed over generations. Either way, the result is the same. Plants move. Slowly, deliberately, like monks in a silent retreat. You reach up and brush the side of a frond. It shivers. Maybe it's the wind. Or maybe it knows. Beneath your feet, the roots of a palm spider outward in a crescent shape. One side is clearly newer, thicker, fresher, pointed toward a sliver of light cutting down from the canopy above. The other side? Withered, cracked, giving up. If this tree had a face, it would be squinting toward the sun like a retiree on a Florida beach. And here's a funny little comparison. Imagine if humans behaved like this. Got a better apartment across town? Great. Just slowly grow a new leg in that direction. Don't worry about moving the rest of your body yet. Just let the old leg wither naturally. Eventually, you'll be standing in the new place. Bonus points if you don't even notice the transition until someone points it out 10 years later. It's ridiculous, but it works. Movement doesn't need muscles. Sometimes it only needs a reason. And in the Amazon, light is always reason enough. So the walking palm doesn't chase light the way an animal might. It leans. It reroutes. It takes its time. It outweighs its competition. And in a place this competitive, patience is a weapon. You step back and look at the forest around you. Everything here is leaning slightly, stretching, bending, reaching. Some trees twist around others like dancers locked in permanent embrace. Some hang crookedly, half dead, still straining for one more drop of sunlight. It's not chaos. It's choreography. It's just in slow motion. And there, off to your left, another walking palm tilts its crown toward the same patch of sky. Quietly, steadily, not walking exactly, just avoiding the darkness. You've now wandered through myths, route mechanics, light-chasing choreography, and still, the question lingers in the back of your mind like a mosquito in your ear. Does the walking palm really walk? Time to face the skepticism head on. Let's start with the botanists. Some absolutely loathe the nickname walking tree. They call it sensational, misleading, and scientifically embarrassing. Their argument: there is no confirmed, measurable evidence that the trunk of Socratia exoryza actually changes position. Yes, new roots sprout, old roots decay, the structure adjusts. But the center of gravity, the main stem, it stays in the same place. That's not walking, they say. That's just vertical landscaping, and they're not entirely wrong. Observational studies of these palms over years, some even decades, show only minor displacements, if any. The base of the tree may shift slightly due to erosion, or tilt gently because of uneven growth, but the dramatic idea of a tree tiptoeing through the forest like an Ent from Tolkien, probably not happening. So here's your mainstream geography fact. In controlled studies in Costa Rica and Peru, researchers placed markers around Socratia individuals and monitored them for movement. Most showed little or no change in position over time, and none walked more than a few centimeters, even over many months. Some didn't move at all. Cue the sound of disappointed eco-tourists lowering their cameras. But then again, what if we've been asking the wrong question? Let's bring in the philosophers for a moment. Yes, we're going there. Because even if the trunk doesn't relocate dramatically, the rest of the tree does. The root system reconfigures itself. The angle of growth shifts. The very strategy of survival is dynamic. And if movement is defined as purposeful change in position over time, then maybe this really is walking. Just on a timescale we aren't built to appreciate. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some field researchers swear that they've returned to a tree years later and found it in a different spot than they remembered. When pressed, they can't prove it. No GPS, no grid maps, just a gut feeling. I swear it was over there, they say, pointing vaguely into the bush. And the locals? They usually just smile. Scientists still argue over whether the term walking is metaphor or mechanism. Some propose renaming the palm with something less dramatic. like tilting root palm or multi-anchored palm. But let's be honest, no one's buying a plane ticket to see a multi-anchored anything. Tourism thrives on charm, not precision. Besides, even if the tree's movement is minimal, it's still unique. No other species of palm in the region has quite the same stilt root architecture. And those roots aren't just decorative. They serve real functions: flood resistance, structural support, and, yes, possibly directional adjustment. You crouch beside one now. The roots are like stilts from a collapsed circus tent, splayed, knotted, weathered. One is cracked at the base. Another seems freshly grown, still sheathed in papery skin. The whole assembly looks like a slow-motion game of pickup sticks frozen in time. You can't shake the feeling that something has shifted. Maybe it's the tree. Maybe it's you. Because here's the thing about the rainforest: perspective is slippery. The canopy above is always in flux. Shadows change by the hour. Trails vanish overnight. Even rivers rewrite their paths after a hard rain. Nothing stays put. Why would the trees? And maybe that's the real answer. The walking palm might not walk like we do. It doesn't strut or amble or wander, but it reacts. It adjusts. It survives. And over decades, those micro adjustments become movement. Not the kind you film with a time lapse. The kind that demands patience, humility, and a willingness to admit that maybe, just maybe, trees know what they're doing. So you stand up, brush off your hands, and look one more time at the palm. You imagine its roots whispering to the soil, deciding where to anchor next. You imagine its crown tilting a fraction of a degree toward a patch of light it's been dreaming about for years. And whether it's walking or not, well, that depends on how long you're willing to watch. Let's say, for the sake of curiosity and a little poetic indulgence, that the walking palm does move, if not dramatically, then with intent. The next question becomes, why? What's the evolutionary payoff for a tree that shuffles through its soggy neighborhood at the speed of continental drift? To answer that, you need to zoom out. Not just out of the jungle, but out of the idea of plants as static. Because in a place like the Amazon, being stuck in one spot is basically waving a sign that says, "Please overgrow me." Here's your mainstream geography fact. The Amazon rainforest is home to over 16,000 tree species, many of which compete for the same narrow slice of canopy space. Every patch of forest is a competitive coliseum, and even small differences, like who can lean a few centimeters toward better light, can be the deciding factor between success and slow, leafy death. So when you're a slender palm, born in the shadow of giants, you need an edge. And stilt roots may offer exactly that. They don't just lift the trunk above floodwaters. They give the tree the structural agility to grow in uneven soil, to rebalance after erosion, to reach for light in a way rigid-rooted trees can't. And maybe, if you squint at the data long enough, to move away from a problem and toward a solution. It's not walking for fun, it's walking to survive. But here's the quirky tidbit. One fringe hypothesis suggests that mobility might help walking palms evade enemies. Yes, enemies. Root-eating fungi, parasitic vines, invasive insects. Imagine being able to lean just enough to exit the radius of a slow-growing fungus colony. It's not running, but it's a dodge, a subtle one, like shifting to the other side of the couch when your cat starts coughing. Scientists still argue whether this ability gives walking palms a real fitness advantage. Some studies suggest they live longer than similar palms without stilt roots. Others say there's no measurable difference, only a morphological curiosity. But then again, evolutionary benefits aren't always obvious in the short term. Sometimes you win just by not losing for a very, very long time. Now let's be honest, this kind of movement isn't cheap. The tree invests significant energy into growing and maintaining its roots. The constant production and decay cycle takes resources that could otherwise go into growing taller or producing fruit. That means this strategy must provide some benefit, or it wouldn't have survived the ruthless culling of evolution. And maybe that benefit isn't just getting to better ground, but staying stable on it once you're there. Imagine this. Heavy rains come early one season. The soil beneath a patch of palms begins to slump. Most trees tilt and stay tilted, but the walking palm, it grows fresh roots on the high side, balancing itself like a tightrope walker. While others struggle to stay upright, it simply adjusts. In that sense, mobility isn't about distance. It's about resilience. You glance around now, noticing the terrain more sharply. Slight inclines, puddles forming where tree roots have lifted the ground. You spot a walking palm on the edge of a shallow ravine. Half its roots are pointed uphill, the other half dangling in space like they haven't yet decided whether to commit. It's mid-thought, mid-step, and entirely at home in the instability. There's something admirable about that. Most trees commit to a spot and bet their lives on it. The walking palm, it keeps its options open. And here's a final thought for this section. Maybe the walk isn't about where the tree ends up, but about what it avoids. A flood, a fungus, a patch of shade, a patch of soil too acidic, too dense, too crowded. You don't need to win the forest game to survive here. You just need to stay in it long enough to drop your seeds and let the next generation roll the dice. So if it takes 30 years to shift 2 meters, so be it. At least you're still standing, down here in the under canopy, where light flickers like a fading signal, and every breath smells faintly of damp stone and rotting fruit. We're finally starting to understand the walking palm's world, not from above, but from below, from the roots perspective, from the soil up. This is microhabitat territory. And if you thought tree movement was strange, wait until you find out how much a single square meter of rainforest floor can change the course of a tree's life. Let's start small, microscopically small. Here's your mainstream geography fact. In tropical rainforests like the Amazon, the soil is incredibly complex, layered with millions of microbial species, symbiotic fungi, bacteria, nematodes, and of course, a never-ending parade of insects. In just 1 teaspoon of Amazonian soil, you might find as many as 10,000 distinct species. That's more biodiversity in a pinch of dirt than in most North American forests combined. And that biodiversity isn't just background noise, it's infrastructure. Entire root systems rely on partnerships with mycorrhizal fungi, which help absorb nutrients in exchange for sugars. But here's the catch. Not all fungus colonies are created equal. Some zones are rich with beneficial networks, others, toxic wastelands, and these zones can change over a few feet, or even less. So if a tree like the walking palm can lean toward better soil chemistry via root replacement, however slow, it may access more favorable microhabitats. Imagine slowly relocating your toes to a patch of floor that happens to offer better oxygen, More nutrients, fewer enemies. No trunk required, just roots, choosing wisely. Here is your quirky tidbit. There's emerging research that some trees, yes, including Socratea, may redirect root growth away from underground chemical cues that signal nearby pathogens or competitors. In other words, they can detect trouble in the dirt and slowly back out of it. Scientists still argue about the accuracy of root-level decision-making. Is it reflexive? Is it driven purely by hormonal gradients? Or is there some deeper emergent intelligence at play? The term plant cognition is still controversial, but the evidence is piling up that roots are not just passive straws. They explore, they avoid, they remember. And all of this plays out in the quiet, twitchy space between leaf litter and bedrock. From a root's eye view, the world is not made of sunbeams and chlorophyll. It's a battlefield of molds, mites, toxic metals, rot pockets, and the occasional ant nest. A walking palm doesn't just grow roots where there's light. It grows them where it can live. You squat beside one now, inspecting the base. The youngest roots are glossy and red-brown, arching toward a small ridge of darker soil. A few meters away, a decomposing log steams softly in the afternoon heat, its surface flecked with pale mushrooms. Between here and there, a subtle difference in fungal activity. Enough, maybe, to push one root further, while another dries back in retreat. It's like each root is playing a solo in a quiet botanical jazz band, improvising, reacting, following the rhythm of nutrients, moisture, and resistance. Now, let's bring in a surprising collaborator: ants. Leafcutter ants, in particular, don't just harvest leaves. They cultivate underground fungus gardens. And guess what? Lives near the nests, palms, including walking palms. While the relationship isn't formally classified as symbiotic, some researchers believe the ants inadvertently condition the soil around their nests, enriching it with nutrients, and trees with flexible root systems, like Socratea, might benefit by drifting their roots toward those sweetened patches. It's not conscious. It's not friendship. But it's movement shaped by opportunity. And opportunity in the Amazon is fleeting. One year, the soil under your roots is perfect. The next, it's dry, acidic, or crowded by newcomers. So the palm adapts, inching its anchor points toward better conditions. And in doing so, it may cross not meters, but microzones, each with its own rules, inhabitants, and hazards. You glance down one last time, imagining what's going on below your feet. Tiny beetles tunneling through dirt, fungal hyphae stretching like subway lines, root hairs tasting the soil, deciding yes or no. It's not chaos. It's navigation. Without eyes, without language, without urgency. Just patience. And in the long game of survival, that might be enough. Time feels strange out here. You've been walking for what might be hours, or maybe minutes. But in the forest's clock, you haven't even blinked, and that brings us to a shift in perspective. One that's quietly humming in the background of everything we've explored so far. Amazon, time is not your time. If you judge the walking palm, or anything in this forest, by human standards of speed, decision-making, or even cause and effect, you're going to miss the whole show. Here's your mainstream geography fact. Many trees in the Amazon live for hundreds of years. Some hardwoods, like the Brazil nut, or ironwood trees, can reach well over 500 years of age. And while the walking palm isn't in the ancient longevity club, its life cycle still spans decades. That's plenty of time to make moves, just not on your schedule. To us, stillness looks like silence, but to the palm, it's action stretched over a lifetime. Imagine living in quarter speed. The sun arcs a little slower. Shadows drift like glaciers. Storms roll through in extended frames. That's what it's like for the walking palm. Movement doesn't need to be fast. It just needs to be timed right. You crouch beside one of these trees and picture its last 10 years. A rival tree fell nearby, leaving a burst of sunlight in its wake. The palm leaned, new roots grew. A vine tried to choke the light. The palm shifted again, slowly, gracefully. It didn't panic. It adapted. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some researchers have used decade-long time-lapse photography to monitor tropical plant movement. Yes, decade-long. While most trees show little change, palms like Socratia do display minor trunk shifts, root replacements, and canopy reorientations that seem purposive when viewed across long enough stretches. But you'd never see it happen with your own eyes. Not unless you stood perfectly still for 30 years, which, let's be honest, even the sloths would find unreasonable. Scientists still argue over how to categorize this type of behavior. Is it movement or morphology? Is a tree that slowly leans and adjusts root position really in motion, or simply reacting to structural stress? Some want to reframe the question entirely. Maybe movement isn't about distance or speed. Maybe it's about responsiveness. And that's where things get beautiful. Because when you slow down, really slow down, you begin to see everything differently. What looked like chaos becomes choreography. What seemed random becomes reason. Even the mist curling through the canopy above starts to feel like it's part of the dance. You take a deep breath. The air is thick and humid, but fragrant too. Gingery roots, fungal threads, maybe even the ghost of some animal that passed through an hour ago. The forest never rushes. It never stalls. It simply continues. Every leaf unfurling on its own clock. Every root exploring its own map. So maybe the walking palm doesn't need to cover ground to prove it's moving. Maybe it just needs to show that time belongs to it, not the other way around. You glance around and realize many of the trees here have changed position since you first entered this patch. Not physically, necessarily, but their shapes, their shadows, the direction their trunks lean, the vines coiled up their sides. It's not where they are that shifted. It's how they are. In this forest, stillness isn't stagnation. It's strategy. And then it clicks. The walking palm isn't unusual because it moves. It's unusual because it makes that movement visible. Its stilt roots put its choices on display. Its lean becomes a sentence in the story of the forest. And you're just one more animal, passing through the paragraph. So you stop watching for movement in meters or minutes. Instead, you start watching in seasons, in shadows, in the space between falling fruit and the seedling it becomes. You walk on slowly, and behind you, the palm remains, just slightly tilted, slightly forward, as if it knows something about tomorrow that you haven't yet caught up to. You're a few kilometers deeper into the jungle now, somewhere between, I think we passed that vine already, and did that bird just laugh at me? And just when you think you've seen every version of slow motion plant strategy, you stumble onto something a little more social. Right at the base of another Socratia exoryza, there's a flurry of activity, dozens, maybe hundreds of ants weaving in and out of its root system, like commuters late for work. You crouch low, careful not to sit on a scorpion, again, and watch. What you're seeing isn't just a bug parade, it's an accidental alliance. Welcome to the world of root politics, where trees and animals influence each other's movements without ever shaking hands. Here's your mainstream geography fact. In tropical rainforests, symbiotic relationships are the norm, not the exception. From orchids clinging to tree trunks, to bromeliads offering shelter to frogs, to ants defending certain plants in exchange for sugary bribes. These interactions form the living architecture of the forest. And Socratia, for all its supposed autonomy, is not alone in its journey. Let's start with the ants. Leafcutter ants, army ants, and especially Azteca ants are known to nest in and around palms. They patrol the trunk and roots, keeping away herbivores and even some parasitic fungi. In return, they gain shelter and a base close to rich foraging grounds. It's not a handshake deal exactly, but it works. Now for the quirky tidbit. Some scientists believe that ant activity near the roots can actually improve soil conditions. Their tunnels aerate the earth, increasing drainage in the otherwise boggy terrain. Their waste products fertilize the nearby zone. Even the act of removing competing seedlings and fungi helps keep the area clear for new root growth. Which brings us back to the walking palms movement. Picture this. One side of its root base becomes ant central. Tunnels, activity, fertilization. The soil becomes more habitable. Fewer threats, better nutrients. And what does the palm do? It leans in that direction. Not because it knows the ants are there, but because its root sensors detect improved conditions. It responds. It shifts. Is it movement? Yes. Is it intentional in the way we think of intention? That's where the debates begin. Scientists still argue whether plant movement driven by animal behavior should be considered true interaction or just coincidental benefit. But either way, the walking palm's path may be shaped as much by the six-legged creatures beneath it as by the light above it. And ants aren't the only influencers in this underground soap opera. Earthworms, beetles, burrowing frogs, even small mammals like armadillos, all of them contribute to the soil's microecosystem. They displace material, enrich or deplete nutrient patches, and alter moisture zones. The palm, through its sensitive root system, detects these shifts and grows accordingly. It's like picking the quietest corner of a noisy room, not because you dislike people, but because that's where you can think. Then there's competition from other plants. Many trees exude chemicals into the soil to deter nearby seedlings, what's called allelopathy. If the walking palm finds itself amid hostile root neighbors, it may grow roots away from the chemical hostility and toward more cooperative ground. The result? A palm that seems to be choosing its company wisely. You stand again, brushing away a curious ant, and look at the palm from a new angle. It's no longer just an elegant anomaly. It's a network node. A participant in a forest-wide conversation conducted through chemical signals, root tips, and soil texture. A conversation that includes ants, worms, rival trees, bacteria, and the occasional wandering tourist. And somehow, through it all, the walking palm manages to stay balanced, adjusting, adapting, navigating not just terrain, but relationships. You think about that for a moment, about how movement isn't always about speed or distance. Sometimes it's about where you put your roots and who you let into your soil. One of the ants climbs up your boot and then pauses, as if to ask what you're doing here. Fair enough. You step back and leave the palm to its silent negotiations. You've reached that point in the forest where everything feels quieter, not because the jungle has gone still, but because you have. Your footsteps slow, your thoughts soften. Even the birds seem to be eavesdropping from a polite distance. And just ahead, nestled in a clearing, bathed in misty light, stands one more walking palm. Except this one looks different. Its roots are wider, its trunk slightly charred on one side, and the soil around it feels dry, almost brittle. You crouch and run your fingers through the dirt. It's soft, yes, but it's missing the signature squish of a well-hydrated rainforest floor. Welcome to the Amazon's future, or at least one possible version of it. Here's your mainstream geography fact. The Amazon rainforest is experiencing increasing climatic stress due to deforestation, illegal mining, rising temperatures, and shifting rainfall patterns. Certain regions now suffer prolonged dry seasons that used to be unheard of, and the consequences are rippling through every layer of the ecosystem, from rivers to root tips. And that includes the walking palm. For a species that thrives on flexibility, you'd think it'd be well suited to change. But the walking palm's signature move, slow root-led adaptation, depends on conditions that are rapidly vanishing. Less rain means drier soil. Drier soil means slower nutrient cycling. And slower nutrients mean harder decisions for a tree that measures time in seasons, not seconds. You look closer at the roots. One side is healthy, the other is cracked. Some of the root tips are dry and blackened. The lean toward the healthier patch is visible, a subtle tilt, like a chess player who's just realized they're two moves from checkmate. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some researchers have started documenting areas where Socratia exoriza appears to be declining in numbers, particularly in regions closest to agricultural encroachment, whether it's due to soil compaction, water scarcity, or altered microbial networks. The palm's movement advantage might be fading in areas where the ground beneath it can no longer support change. Scientists still argue whether walking palms will adapt fast enough. Could their seeds evolve to favor drier soil? Will the species shift its range to higher elevations or cooler valleys? Or is it destined to become a curious footnote in rainforest history, like a creature too clever to run and too slow to flee? It's a quiet existential threat, not dramatic, not sudden, just creeping, kind of like the palm itself. But there are glimmers of hope, too. In regions where local communities protect the forest, walking palms thrive. Some ecotourism initiatives are focused on preserving the unique flora of the Amazon, not just the big celebrities like jaguars and sloths, but the quiet marvels like Socratia. And because this tree is such a powerful symbol, so strange, so memorable, it's become a kind of ambassador for slow burn conservation. You step back and take it in again. The forest around this clearing still hums with life. A butterfly floats past lazily, wings like stained glass. Somewhere above, a toucan lets out a croaky laugh. And beneath it all the tree remains, not walking perhaps, but waiting, adjusting, tilting ever so slightly toward survival. Because here's the thing. Even if the environment changes faster than the tree can, its strategy remains the same. Wait, watch, respond. Adaptation isn't always flashy. Sometimes it's just refusal to quit. And in a world that increasingly rewards speed, noise, and immediacy, maybe the walking palm's quiet endurance is a message worth listening to. You run your hand along the bark one last time. It feels warm, alive, vulnerable, yes, but determined. It may not outpace climate change, but it'll try. The trail narrows now, and the forest starts to pull in tighter around you. The air is thicker, quieter. Even the leaves seem to hang more heavily. But just ahead, through a thicket of tangled lianas and over a stream that murmurs like it's remembering something, you spot one last walking palm. This one is old. You can tell by the size of its root flare, wider than any others you've seen. The roots splay out like the ribs of a collapsed dome. Some split, some moss-covered, some reaching into the mud like they're tasting memories. The trunk is tall and rough, its fronds weathered and full of gaps, but still arching proudly toward the light. You take a slow breath. This is the end of the trail, but not for the tree. It's still deciding where to go next. Standing here, you realize that the story of the walking palm isn't just about how it moves. It's about the privilege of movement. In a jungle that buries the slow and erases the still, the ability to shift, even slightly, is a radical advantage. Here's your mainstream geography fact. In ecology, this idea is known as micromobility, the ability of an organism to subtly reposition itself within its habitat to optimize for survival. Animals do it constantly, but plants, only a few. And the walking palm stands among them, adapting on a scale we can barely detect, but which changes everything. And here's your final quirky tidbit. Some field guides say that if you visit the same walking palm 5 years in a row, you won't find it in the same spot. But no one ever records the difference. Not because they forget, but because they choose not to measure. The mystery is part of the beauty. The possibility that it moved is what matters. Scientists still argue over whether we're romanticizing this tree too much. Some say it's just clever anatomy paired with wishful thinking. Others insist we're glimpsing something deeper, a plant responding to the world not just with growth, but with agency. And maybe they're both right. You circle slowly around the tree, tracing the arc of its outermost roots. Each one marks a decision point, a path taken, a risk that paid off or didn't. You find one old root, nearly rotten through, still clinging to a stone. Nearby, a fresh root is plunging into new soil, rich and dark. It's moving. It's still here. That's enough. You let your hand rest lightly against the bark, and you whisper, because it feels appropriate, not goodbye, but take care. It's not a farewell. It's a shared understanding. The palm will be here long after you're gone. Maybe a meter to the left, maybe 2. Maybe standing exactly where you found it, but only because this place, for now, still offers what it needs. The forest breathes around you, not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily, just like the tree. So now, as we ease into the closing rhythm of tonight's journey, picture that final walking palm, tall and patient, resting on a web of roots shaped by time and chance. The light fades gently through the canopy, dappling its leaves in gold and green. Somewhere nearby, water trickles over smooth stones. and far above, a bird calls out one last sleepy note. Let yourself move slower now, not physically, but mentally. Let the urgency melt away. Here, among ancient trees and thoughtful roots, there is no schedule, no pressure, no rush, only the pulse of the forest, the hush of leaves, the quiet strength of something that endures by changing one careful inch at a time. You don't need to walk fast to get somewhere meaningful. Sometimes, staying soft, curious, and adaptable is enough. Sometimes, it's everything. Close your eyes and imagine the palm again, leaning gently toward the light. Not desperate, just deliberate. It has nowhere else to be, and neither do you. Let the sounds fade now. The forest humming low, like a lullaby stitched from rain and wind. The earth beneath your feet solid, alive, and somehow reassuring. You're here. You're safe. You're allowed to rest. The tree is still walking, but for now you don't have to. Sleep well.